Good morning, everyone. We welcome you to our Sunday morning roundtable discussion, and today is Sunday, July 22nd, 2018. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America, and we will begin with our morning prayer. Lawrence.
From 220 Miscellany. I believe in obeying the laws of the land. I practice and teach disobedience, since justice is the moral signification of law. Injustice denotes the absence of law. Each day I pray for the pacification of all national difficulties, for the brotherhood of man, for the end of idolatry and infidelity, and for the growth and establishment of Christian religion, Christ's Christianity. I also have faith that my prayer availeth, and that he who is overturning will overturn until he whose right it is shall reign. Each day I pray, God bless my enemies, make them thy friends, give them to know the joy and the peace of love.
Thank you. And from miscellaneous writings, Mary Baker Eddy. We today in this classroom are enough to convert the world if we are of one mind. For then the whole world will feel the influence of this mind, as when the earth was without form, and mind spake, and form appeared. Our subject today is truth, and golden text is 3 John. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. And Suzanne, since you just joined us and you wrote about it on the forum, would you like to say a few words?
Good morning. Shall I read what I wrote?
Well, you can not necessarily read it, just say, you can remember it, right? Tell us what you wrote. Gist of it.
Yeah, the gist is, I asked myself, it seems obvious, but what does it mean to walk in truth? And so I thought about it, and it really is getting serious about it and not just keeping it to myself, not sharing it as I did for so very long, for so many years, because I was afraid to mention Christian Science because I was embarrassed about publications, etc. And I didn't have a clue as to how to truly live Christian Science, despite having grown up in it. And so it was really the teachings in this church that helped me to understand how to share Christian Science, how to live it, how to actually do something, because walking in the truth is actually doing something in the truth, not just keeping it to myself, but sharing it, demonstrating it to the best I can, and just, so, it's like I began to be a Christian Scientist when I joined this church. I came out of the shadows, and these strong teachings are amazing and all the testimonies on Wednesday night help us learn how to demonstrate Christian Science in little ways and in big ways, and that's what I wanted to share.
Well, thank you. And as you really grasp this truth, which is what Lawrence read this morning about the laws, principles of the world, the universe, you have a security in it, and then you feel like you can share it. I didn't, as Dan was saying, before coming here and learning, I didn't have that security. How could I share it when I wasn't sure about it myself? Anybody else? it pertains to what she says. I mentioned it in my testimony on Wednesday. Mrs. Eddy's notes from the class of 1889 in Collectania. At first she says, "This is my wish that you do not talk of or discuss this truth outside the class while studying. You will have questions enough of your own to settle without wrestling with those of other people. But when you have come into the clear understanding of truth, you have no right to withhold it from those who seek it honestly. For it is God's truth, not yours. But be sure and give it out more in your own life." This is God's truth. We don't own it. It's His truth. And as we learn it and imbibe the laws and find them so practical, if we don't give it out, what happens?
We'll lose it.
Yes, you will lose it.
It will be taken from you.
Like the story in the Bible of the talents and the man who hid his one talent. You have to give it. It's a requirement. And truly, you don't understand it if you don't give it out. That means you haven't gotten it yet. Because if you get it, the natural outcome.
I think it's true, too, that the more you share it, the more conviction you gain in it, I feel.
I have found that you don't have to say a lot. Sometimes it's very few words or a blessing, and just greeting someone with real love.
Thank you.
In fact, it's better the fewer the words.
Yes.
Well, and isn't this what Mrs. Eddy's alertness to duty is all about in the manual? I mean, how does the alertness to duty finish? By his works he shall be judged. Yeah. By your works you will be judged.
Actions of all mankind and govern them.
Yeah. And what is it that we have to protect ourselves against?
Aggressive mental.
Being deceived.
Exactly. And that's what this is all about. Once you know the truth, you protect the truth. Don't allow yourself to be deceived by the lie. Because the lie is going to come at you to try to persuade you that the truth is not true, or not relevant, or not desirable. And if you adequately protect yourself, you will live this truth day by day, and your works will show it. And you will be a great blessing to the world.
If you talk too much, it shows you don't understand it. You're trying to convince yourself. So, fewer the words, the better. And as Shardy said, too, an example, just living it.
I was just going to say, Albert Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it.
That's true. It is so true.
Yeah, I read something, Shakespeare, I don't know if I can quote it exactly, but it's something we should show less than we have and speak less than we know. I thought, as they say, less is better. So, thank you, Suzanne. And then Florence, with her forum about the riveting question, what is truth?
I was thinking of Pilate and his question to Jesus. I'll read it. It's not long. Pilate asked this question in John 18:38. Pilate said unto him, "What is truth?" When Jesus said at the end of John 18:37, "Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice." As someone said, the world is stirring, and this question is being asked the world over. Multitudes are desiring the answer, but the sincerest seekers of truth will be taught of our great teacher. Christ Jesus and Mrs. Eddy, the revelator to this age, have taught that God is truth, and how wonderful to find this out. When we come willingly to be emptied of all our past misconceptions, teachings, and false traits, and are willing to be filled with the knowledge from the one, or he that is perfect in knowledge, which is from Job, we will find the only truth that becomes a law to ourselves, which will heal, protect, guide us to how to use it, save, and make us free. Thank God for Mrs. Eddy, who loved all enough to go through all she went through to make how to use the truth clear and available for all mankind. The truth from the Bible is explained in her greatest work, of which she wrote, "This book may be distorted by shallow criticism or by careless or malicious students, and its ideas may be temporarily abused and misrepresented, but the science and truth therein will forever remain to be discerned and demonstrated." And that's on Science and Health, page 110.
Thank you.
Something comes to me from Shakespeare. "To thine own self be true. Thou canst not then be false to any man."
Thank you. Love that too. And learning to be true to yourself is, to me, it was a great difficulty because I was trying to please so many people. I didn't seem to know how to be true to myself. And I didn't know how to be honest. I didn't realize. I thought I was a good, honest little Christian Scientist. But I wasn't. I was hypocritical, trying to portray a certain image, while inside I was churning around. And that's hypocritical. I had to learn, and Mrs. Evans, thank God, beat me up until I finally got it. So be true to yourself. Be honest. I love this, and I've given it before, but it's the first edition. In the first edition of Science and Health, a statement that we are familiar with, but it's said a little different. When Mrs. Eddy says, "Unless a man advances spiritually, he is not scientific. And if he is scientific, he must start honestly and journey some every day. And however long he is in reaching the desired goal, if his honesty be preserved, he will finish his course." Don't try to fool anybody, and you certainly never, God is not mocked. You can never fool God. But be honest, progress from your highest sense of right, and you will make progress. I know Mrs. Evans said it, maybe it was Mrs. Eddy too, and I know in my own experience in the practice, it's almost impossible to heal a dishonest person. If they come lying and hiding things, you can't reach them. A barrier is you can't reach them. They must be humble enough to be honest. Say, this is where I am, this is what's going on in my life. And what is always that prevents the honesty?
Pride.
Pride.
There's a verse. This is George from Vermont. There's a wonderful verse in Timothy. I think it's 1 Timothy 3:1. It says something to the effect of, "The goal of our instruction is love from a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith." And if you look at the progression of that verse, that the goal of our instruction, which is learning the Word, learning Christian Science, learning all these things, it's love. That verse is really about honesty. It's about integrity, because it starts with a pure heart, which means our motives are right. It goes to a good conscience, which means that we're not violating our own beliefs and from there progresses to a sincere faith, which means that we're actually practicing what we believe, that we're actually doing, we're doing, as Suzanne said earlier, we're doing what we believe. So I think that verse encapsulates quite well what you just said about honesty and integrity.
Thank you.
It's the pure heart that finds God, the beatitude. So.
Yes, it is.
And that's a good, really important point, because if we are honestly practicing the best we know, it's in our heart. Our practice will prove what's true, and it will show to us what's untrue. And by honestly practicing what we genuinely feel to be what God wants for us, we will discover what in fact is true. And it'll be easier and easier for us to discern God speaking to us versus, other thoughts that aren't true. But it's the honesty that enables you to learn from the mistakes and to discern the thoughts that are true and the thoughts that are not true.
In science, we learn to embrace whatever happens to us, take responsibility for it. For instance, if you're in some kind of an accident, you say, well, you're not at fault, it wasn't your fault. Well, if it happened to you, there was as we'll get into it more later, but this falling away, there was something not right, a lack of alertness, something. If you are honest and can embrace it and admit this, you will go forward. If you blame others and always think if you were doing perfectly, you were right, everyone else is wrong, you will not. And this is the humility that is needed to progress. You've got to always be examining your own thought. That doesn't mean to condemn your thought or condemn yourself, but it means to look honestly within your thinking and realize whatever was operating, you were not under God's influence, you were under something else. And admit to it so you can change and grow and drop the false for the new. Recently, I've been doing the audio of science and philosophy in miscellaneous writings, and it is wonderful on this topic of truth. And in it are many wonderful things, but she says, when every form and mode of evil disappears in human thought, and mollusks and radiate, or spiritual concepts testifying to one Creator, then earth is full of His glory, and Christian science has overshadowed all human philosophy, and being is understood in startling contradiction of human hypotheses. And Socrates, Plato, Kant, Locke, Berkeley, Tyndall, Darwin, and Spencer, what did they do?
Bow at the feet of Jesus.
Spit at the feet of Jesus. Think of it. She is taking all the philosophies of the ages, because this is what we started with. What is truth? Everyone's searching for truth. What is it? It is the principles of what Jesus taught, what we find in the Bible. And all of these philosophers will have to come to that. She says that if it were taught in the schools, if the Bible and Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures had in our schools the time and attention that human hypotheses consume, they would advance the world. The false theories whose names are legion, gilded with sophistry and what Jesus had not, namely mere book learning, letter without law, gospel, or demonstration, have no place in Christian science. This science requires man to be honest, just, pure, to love his neighbor as himself, and to love God supremely. I never knew what the word sophistry meant. Does anyone?
It's false reasoning, right?
False knowledge.
Yes, it is.
False.
Thank you. It is false reasoning. A person who reasons with clear but fallacious arguments, and fallacious is fallacious. Excuse me. Fallacious is untrue, incorrect. So it's misleading. They speak well, and it sounds good, and they'll take an argument. It sounds, wow, that's it. Yeah, that's really good. But it's not. It's false reasoning. If you want to get back to the correct reasoning, you take it back to the Bible, to the teachings of Christ Jesus, and also, we here, to the teachings of Mary Baker Eddy, who took all her reasoning, all her arguments were all totally based on the Bible. She also says in Science and Philosophy, if you can't prove it, it means nothing. You've got to be able to prove it. This is a demonstrable science. So if you're not proving it, what?
You don't understand it.
Yes, you're not understanding it, and you are, in some respect, not living it, not being honest.
Loving her more.
Loving her more.
Don't tell other people you're a Christian Scientist.
Yes, because she says also in this article that as a literature, Christian metaphysics is hampered by lack of proper terms in which to express what it means. As a science, it is held back by the common ignorance of what it is and what it does, and more than all else, by the impostors that come in its name. To be appreciated, it must be conscientiously understood and introduced. All these imposters, and by imposters, these people who say they're Christian scientists, but probably they've never even read the textbook or prose works. They just want to claim the healings. They don't know much about it, and they give it a terrible name. It has to be conscientiously introduced by someone who understands it and loves Mrs. Eddy. And this is what and why we bring up the organization at times, because it's what either maliciously or ignorantly they haven't been doing. And I want to pause briefly and go to the latest Hartsook letter, which speaks of Ann Beal and the passing of Ann Beal. And it gives the history of her, which I didn't know entirely, or if I did know, I forgot. She wrote a very important booklet called Animal Magnetism. We don't sell it here, but if you don't have it, you should have it. Maybe we should sell it. Anyway, when she wrote it, she wanted it to be published. She was a listed practitioner by the BOD, and they didn't want to. So then she published it herself. They didn't like that. And her teacher told her not to do it. But she did it anyway and realized she was going to be excommunicated for doing it, so she took her name out. And then she moved out to California and started Bookmark and sold these wonderful books, unauthorized, which we've all talked about. There's no such thing as that. Mrs. Eddy never said it. And she helped a great many people by selling those books fearlessly, even under attacks by the BOD. And many people I now have come to learn, they knew her, they talked to her. She was very kind and loving. And
Was there a practitioner?
well, I don't know if she was, but she was in a way.
No, she was.
She was?
She was
Okay.
a practice, yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, in her article, which is also quoted in this, from the Law of Love, she writes, if heaven could be reached by brave or superhuman deeds, or intellectual brilliance, or magnificent leadership, or creative genius, or religious devotion, we would have reached the millennium long ago. But the prerequisite for understanding divine reality and demonstrating its healing power is the daily living of the Sermon on the Mount. And this seems to be the single most difficult thing for human nature to achieve. I thought that was quite wonderful. It's true, isn't it? If it could be achieved, if the kingdom of heaven could be achieved by all these other ways, we would be there. Certainly what people look on those paths. But the living of the Sermon on the Mount, he's saying, for some reason that seems to be the hardest for anyone to do. And Mrs. Eddy has said, what did she say about the Sermon on the Mount?
You read it, and lived it, that would be enough?
That would be enough.
Read without comment.
Yes, at our services.
I find Ann Beale's book very helpful. In addition to Animal Magnetism, The Law of Love, that book, and then The Secret Place, and Christian Science Treatment. They're wonderful books that are very helpful.
Well, and that's what I quoted from, The Law of Love.
Yes, that's a wonderful book. I think it brings out so much about the different false traits that we either don't know how repulsive they are. I mean, for example, that's where I read about impatience once, and it's deeper than just not being patient. So it's a lot in that book.
Thank you. Well, we learn from others, and we can be grateful for those who have selflessly given in this way, and she certainly has. So, and we'll know that light does not go out. And I know her son is continuing the bookmark so people can get books there and continue to learn. And she writes, too, and I thought this was important. She's writing about what was going on in the movement, and she says that, my friend, our movement is in deep water today. Many of our churches have closed, and many more, with only a few members, are likely to close over the next decade. And as they close, the material in the bound volumes of the past is disappearing. We are the remnant. These deep spiritual writings coming from the bookmark will help us through this dark time. We have many very dedicated and capable scientists in our movement, but they must have good material to work with. While the Bible and our leaders' writings are the foundation of this work, these other writings help us to go forward as well. The world needs Christian Science, and we can reach it as we are united in praying scientifically. Our combined prayerful work should open the way for Christian Science to enjoy a renaissance. And truly, we can say the same of what we're doing here, Common Purpose. To get the true science out, to get this important understanding of it, to give it conscientiously, to introduce it to people so they really understand it, to get these books and other things out, to bring about a renaissance. And it will result in a renaissance of all things, including our nation, government of all nations, our world. It cannot help but fail to do this. It is the truth with a capital T. Now, I was very pleased at the comments on the forum about Miriam and Aaron. So, let's see, Jeremy, you start with first.
Okay. Well, reading about how Miriam and Aaron spoke out against Moses for marrying the Ethiopian woman, it got me thinking about the strange women that Solomon married. And, of course, I lived my life, too. So anyway, going through from there, you see that they just looked at the situation very humanly and expected the worst because she wasn't an Israelite. And the fact that Moses was not waylaid by it, but, he had dominion in that situation. I was thinking of that a lot, and I found in Gilbert Carpenter's Mary Baker Eddy, Her Spiritual Footsteps, he says, quote, Asa Eddy died as a result of induced animal magnetism, but it was not animal magnetism overpowering a scientifically poised student, for that is something that animal magnetism can never do. There must be a falling away first, end quote. That just got me to see that if you are put off by something, strange woman or whatever, that it's really your own falling away from God that initiated it. You can't blame it on anything else. So I just thought that was really, really helpful for me to see that.
Thank you. This whole story has many deeper meanings to it, and that certainly is one of them. There is a human belief that if two people together, and one is spiritually minded and the other is materially minded, what will happen?
Thought will go down to the materially minded.
Yes, the thought will go down to the material minded. That is why this admonition about who you marry or who you spend time with, who your friends are. You spend a lot of time with people who are anti what you cherish and believe to be true. Eventually, it can wear you down, and you can start thinking right is wrong and wrong is right. Now, in the case of Moses, he was meek and
very meek. In fact.
Yes. And there are always exceptions to every rule, aren't there? You can't judge everything, and this is what they were doing, just judging him and saying, oh, look, he's not obeying some law, and whoa. What motivated that of Miriam? What was that?
Jealousy.
Jealousy. And you can know darn sure it's probably 99% jealousy when that happened. And even, what did she say? She said, hath not indeed the Lord spoken only by Moses? Has he not spoken also by us? There you go. You want to know the troubles that we had in our church? That's what it was about. Jealousy.
My relationship with God is just as good as hers.
Who is she or he?
Or whatever. I'm great too. Whoa.
So that leads us to Linda and her forum comment.
I found something in the Red Book that was just so profound to me. Actually, I was looking up Miriam and came across this, and it just, want me to read the thing from the Red Book? Okay.
And you can comment on what you said beforehand, too.
Well, I was referring to where it said that Moses was very meek. And this subject of meekness comes up a lot in this church. And this really hit me, and I appreciated Moses more because I realized, he gave us the Ten Commandments. He had to have received it. And the more I learn about how Mrs. Eddy taught that the Ten Commandments were so important, the more I appreciate that we got them from him. And it also brought back last week's comment that we need to have the love and appreciate the people who have love and courage to teach us what they know about God. And here again, I thought Miriam and Aaron were not appreciating what Moses was bringing, and they didn't really appreciate his place. And so in this, I found a quote, and it's written by Mary Baker Eddy, and it's found in the Red Book, which is called Essays and Other Footprints, and this was a Bible lesson she was teaching. And it says, quote, Moses would have been a necromancer or a mesmerist had not God equipped him with the spirit of the Ten Commandments, which made him a law to himself. That was a prohibition to evil. Truth, life, and love guided Moses, and this awakened understanding left him not a trickster to cajole or to wrong his race. Moses could not abuse the power that immortal, unerring mind, not the erring mortal mind, confers. Abiding by the Ten Commandments, the servant of God, commissioned to do good, cannot trespass on the rights of mind, cannot steal its treasures or kill its joys, any more than it can be a thief of material things and a murderer. The power of Moses, of prophet and apostle, to heal the sick was Christian science, not mesmerism or the malpractice of mind, that breaks the Ten Commandments, is an outlaw and a secret assassin, trespassing on the secret thoughts and intermeddling with the most sacred rights of mind. The primitive Christians' demonstrations of the power of mind were limited to divine science that should govern all phenomena, since it gives harmony to all and discord to none. End quote.
And Calvin Fry.
All right, and then Mrs. Eddy said once of Calvin Fry, quote, Calvin is invaluable to me in my work because he would not break one of the commandments, end quote.
You want to know the truth? You'll find it. What Aunt Beale said now is what we're reading here in the Bible. That is why it's so criminal to take the Bible out of schools. What did you read to me yesterday?
Well, I just happened to find in the May 31, 1913 edition of the Sentinel, in the inside cover where they list newsworthy items, that in 1913, the governor of Pennsylvania signed into law a requirement that 10 verses of the Bible be read every day without comment in the public schools of Pennsylvania, and that any teacher who refused to do so could be terminated.
Yes.
This was state law in the state of Pennsylvania in 1913.
Now look at it. I was also seeing something. It was about military, and I think it was the Air Force. I don't think it was total general, but someplace where they're no longer putting the Bible out because that might offend people. So they're going to have something called the Facebook or something like that, which is a conglomeration of a lot of different things. Because heaven forbid we offend anyone with the truth. You see, if we lose the truth, we've lost everything. So what do? If the children are not getting it in school, you teach it at home, as I've talked about. You teach it to everyone. We were away this week. I was swimming in a lake with a little neighborhood girl, and I was thanking God for the beautiful day and the beautiful warm water. And she said, God. And then she started bulleting me with questions. I had to go on shore. I had to call Gary out. She said, I'm not religious, but, what about hell? What about heaven? What about this? This little girl was 10 years old. She was hungering and thirsting for the truth. I don't know how long we spoke to her. I was quite taken with her because she was 10 going on, I don't know what, 15.
21.
She was quite something, but the point being, there are plenty of opportunities to share the truth. And in speaking to her, there was another little girl also listening who probably never even heard about God. She was from Taiwan. So any chance you get, you give it. And as we've talked about, it's been in one of our watches recently, Bruce sounded a beautiful statement about in everyone there is what, Bruce?
No, I forgot the exact word, but it's the divine nature, the actual true essence of everyone.
Everyone wants the truth. It's in them. They want it. It's part of their being. Why would God have a creation and then have it not there? It is there, and you have to address it. You talk to it. That's what Elizabeth kept doing when she was having trouble with her son, and that's what's bringing him and has brought him around. It will work. Because why? It's the truth. Now, when I was a child, my father was Lutheran, my mother was Presbyterian. We would sometimes go to the churches, and I did not like to go. I've told you I would hide in the car. My brothers and my parents would go to church, and I would hide. I would hide because I was embarrassed if anyone saw me. So I would hide. I can remember crouching under the seat. I did not want to go to those churches. And then eventually, and I'm not even sure when, 9 or 10 years old, my mother, in reading Science and Health, she was cured of cancer. She found it in an old Victorian home. And then we began going to this Plainfield Christian Science Church. In fact, I went to this Sunday school right where I'm sitting right today. Anyway, I don't remember what my mother taught me much as a child. She read Bible stories to me, but I do know this. She taught me the 10 Commandments. And I probably could be a naughty child and maybe a spoiled child, but God help me if I disobeyed one of those 10 Commandments. And that has served me well. So, if you sometimes don't know where to begin, you can begin there. You can begin there. And in that, it was in what Linda read. You know, killing doesn't mean necessarily blowing someone's head off, but you can kill someone's inspiration, right? You can kill their joy.
Kill their joy, yes.
That's
a crime.
Yes. And that's true about stealing. It doesn't necessarily, she says, maybe not something material, but you can steal, mentally steal, and you know what I mean. These are all in disobedience to the commandments.
Mrs. Eddy made a big issue of that because people literally stole her writings, her inspiration, and put it forth as if it was their own.
And then it became New Age, and then the necromancy that she talks about in this.
Thank you.
That was so profound to me. That if they had followed this, it would not have gone. They would have followed the manual.
Right, right. And behind all of that is dishonesty.
And perhaps jealousy, too.
And jealousy.
Definitely jealousy.
Definitely.
Thou shalt not covet.
Yep.
It's all there. It's in those commandments. It's in the Sermon on the Mount. These are the truths. You want to know the truth? Just work with a few of these things. It will change your life forever. And so now we get to Parthen's comment.
And Parthen's writes, quite a number of commentaries agree that it was Miriam who spoke these ambitious words against Moses. Hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? But Aaron certainly did not argue with her in the least. To belittle Moses was to make others perceive him to be smaller than he truly was, or to paraphrase Laura writing, to rob him of size. So it is not surprising that error would seize upon Moses marrying a Gentile instead of one of the daughters of Abraham. But whether Moses sinned or not is irrelevant here. Even if his accusers were correct, technically speaking, and this point is moot indeed, the aphorism of William Blake fits well here. Quote, a truth that's told with bad intent beats all the lies you can invent. End quote. For this reason, Miriam's and Aaron's self-congratulatory belittling of Moses prefigures modern-day articles and books endorsed by the Boston CS establishment that deliberately underestimate the size of Mrs. Eddy's monumental significance and stupendous achievements.
Boy, is that ever true. And what was all that based on? You can bet it's jealousy. So, and this is where only your spiritual sense will guide you true. You know, people that attack others, they twist the truth for malicious purposes. It might be the truth, but they use it for a wrong purpose, and it's very dangerous. I love that. I've never heard that quote from William Blake. The truth that's told with bad intent beats all the lies you can invent.
I think also there's something about being presumptuous. You know, the motive behind that is all personal and level. You know, Miriam and Aaron, they were close to Moses. I forgot exactly what their relationship was, but it seems like those that are closest to you assume the most presumption. Remind me of that verse in the Psalms, save me, O Lord, from presumptuous sins. We'll be saved from the damnation, or something like that in there.
I felt very sure, thank you, Bruce, if Moses liked this woman, there had to have been something good about her. I don't care what her, whatever. And so it is. That's why we have to be so not quick to judge anything or any situation, or what is it called, legalism. If it doesn't obey this certain law, then that person is just wrong. Well, maybe not so. And as was brought out by Linda's forum, Moses was so in touch with God and the Ten Commandments, he couldn't be swayed to go down to a lower level. If anything, he would bring her up. And that should be, Mrs. Eddy said, if two people are married and one is a real Christian Scientist, what will happen? And the other one is Christian Scientist. Right, if the other one isn't, that person will change.
The other one will soon be.
Yes.
One thing that I reading those the lesson and then the comments, and I just recently got the DVD from Longyear, The House on Broad Street, and I think it might have been also the closeness of Miriam and Aaron to Moses that under superstition would make them a bigger target to do this kind of thing. Because the house on Broad Street, I knew that Asa Gilbert Eddy was a wonderful individual and important to Mrs. Eddy, but until watching that DVD, I didn't understand how important. And so he was very prone to be attacked because he was so valuable to her. And one of the things that taught her understanding of how good of a man he was that at one point she was, according to the DVD, she was rendered unconscious, and the students called Asa Eddy, and he revived her, and from there she realized how well he understood Christian Science. And I knew that he'd taught various, like Julia Bartlett and others, but I didn't realize that at that time she already was spending so much time on science and health that he became invaluable as far as taking over the teaching duties that she didn't have time for. So it was, yep.
It's a very important point. Thank you, Mike. Because what Jeremy read from Carpenter, I mean, I'm not quite sure that was 100% true, that he brought it on. If you could not, I'm saying Asa Eddy brought on the malpractice. There might have been something there. There usually is something. But if Eric cannot get to the target, which is always, in this case, Mrs. Eddy, it would try those around her, her closest and dearest. And Asa Eddy was definitely in that category. And it would try everything it could to trip them up, trip something up. So what? So Mrs. Eddy would be left without her support. That is why Calvin Fry, in his obedience to the Ten Commandments, was so invaluable to her, because he was not knocked out. And he did get knocked out a few times, but she raised him from the dead, literally, where he had a heart attack.
And just to finish that story, when Asa Eddy was ill, very ill, the workers in the house knew it, but they did not let Mrs. Eddy know how serious it was. And she reprimanded them for not letting her know.
Boy, did she, because he passed on. She said if she had known, she could have saved him. So thank you for bringing that up, Mike. That was very important. And I could go on with 2 hours more on this lesson on truth. But remember, honesty is spiritual power. Dishonesty is
human weakness.
That forfeits divine help. And that is a big penalty. Human weakness that forfeits divine help. We have to be honest, the best we know how. So we're going to conclude Mrs. Eddy, her notes from the class of 1889.
Class of 1889. I give you nothing new. There is nothing new under the sun. It is only the application of an eternal truth in a new and practical way. I cannot answer all your questions, for I cannot answer all my own. There is an eternity for us to learn in if we patiently patiently wait. If you cannot understand my terms, wait and see what they mean. Do not misconstrue them by your old interpretations. Come empty of all pre-conscious opinions, creeds, prejudices, doctrines, or isms to receive the truth. And with charity of open minds, receive the truth I give you. Then test the reality of your own by it. Except one is empty, he cannot be filled. No one ever learned a truth by argument, for any falsity can be established by the reasoning of the natural mind. Spiritual truth is only spiritually discerned. I give you but the key to knowledge. You can only unlock by living it in your own life. Otherwise, it will be only theory. There is no salvation in theory. I will never say a word I have not proven. If I theorize, I will tell you so. I can only show the way I have gone. I am only an ambassador, a voice, to lead you into your own kingdom, where God, the truth, alone illumines everyone according to his own degree. The system of truth I am teaching, when reduced, is simply the bringing the Christ to you, or the way, the truth, and the life to your whole being. I wish, as an act of justice, that you hold sacredly in your memory that I assume no good or power of myself, that to God alone I ascribe all love, wisdom, and power, the all in all, the all good, that I am absolutely nothing, a mere instrument in God's hands to be used as he will. This is the only position for any one of us to be in.
That is our leader, Mary Baker Eddy, the woman in the apocalypse. We make no false modesty about it. So she was, well,
she was very neat.
And God could use her and did use her. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.